In dentistry, we live with our patients. If something goes wrong, we'll hear it immediately, or the next time we see them, we're going to hear about it, or they'll be back in the office. Whereas in the MD world, you see your patient, they disappear, and you have no idea if it's worked or not. The tongue dysfunction part of dentistry has never been addressed well enough, but it's just starting to come around, and that's why I beg every hygienist I ever meet to become a myofunctional therapist. We need more of them. Stop thinking of yourself or allowing people to think of you as a mouth cleaner. You are disrupting biofilm. You're doing more to decrease people's risk for inflammatory diseases. 70% of us will die from chronic inflammatory diseases, and no one will do more for that than a dental hygienist.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists podcast, an Endeavor Business Media production. This is episode number 379. I'm your host, Andrew Johnston, and thank you so much for being with us today. And I got to say, you all surprised me this past week. The feedback that we received, both Karen Davis and myself, from her episode was incredible. And it was heartfelt. It was honest. I think for some of them, it was, incredibly raw and vulnerable feedback. And I just, this is why I love you all so much. This is just amazing. Thank you so much for sending that feedback. It absolutely made my day, but I know it just really spoke to the heart of Karen. So I did forward her everything that you all sent me or to the podcast email address. So just want to let you guys all know that she's also very thankful for everything that you all sent. But this week, man, none of you even stand a chance. It's like a 1-2 punch. We had Karen Davis last week, and now we have Dr. Mike Czubiak. It's just not fair for any of you. I'm really, really happy with this episode. And I know you're going to love it because Dr. Czubiak and I, we talk a little bit about probably one of the most impressive things for me about him is he kind of goes through a renaissance in his career, a rebirth of sorts. And he's so positive and so joyful. He took a really rough and tough situation, turned it into something that he is so incredibly passionate about. It's absolutely contagious. And I think a great lesson for us all. I really like what he's doing with Airway and sleep and connecting the oral and the systemic. I really can't wait for you to listen to this episode. It's going to be fantastic. And then next week, also exciting because we have a hot button topic as we welcome in Veronica Blea, and we talk about her experience as a dental assistant and how we, dental assistants and dental hygienists, can have a better relationship with each other between the two groups. And I just saw a post literally today as I'm recording this intro, which, by the way, is on Tuesday, April 18th, not really Wednesday when this is released. But I saw the post today, and it was essentially about a law or bill that's going out in one of the states that's going to allow dental assistants to scale. And someone posted an opposition to this thing happening. And oh my gosh, this is why we need this episode. We cannot communicate. Not that social media is a place for good communication anyway, but we just cannot communicate with each other. We all have hurt feelings about stuff. And I think it's probably a little bit more one-sided in this particular situation, but a lot of people have a lot of hurt feelings about this kind of stuff. And so I don't know. I'm just excited. It's a hot button topic. We'll see what you all think after next week's episode. So it is mid-April. Tax day was yesterday, the 18th. I hope you are all enjoying the springtime. I know some of you in the northern states are still getting some snow, which is just boggling my mind. I hope you're all getting ready for school to be out, maybe in a couple of months or a few months for some of you. Here in Florida, my kids are actually out, and I think it's 6 weeks from now. Time is absolutely speeding up. So that's where we're at, kind of like in our stage of life, where the school years, they seem to be shorter and shorter. Time left with the kids in the house is getting scary short. Zach, our oldest, he'll only have 2 years left after he finishes this school year. And Hiram only has 3. And so it's going to be bam, bam. We lose them both. And so what we're looking at doing right now is we're planning for some more memories. something that I think that you all have known about me. I'm just a workaholic, and it's not like I wasn't there for the kids. I was definitely there for the kids, but now when they have the ability to make a memory and will retain the memory a lot more likely, I'm all about it. So the last several years, it's just been kind of my passion. And so right now I'm looking at some road trips to take this summer. If possible, I want to maybe have like a cabin in the mountains, maybe a stream or a river, maybe even like a lakeside, something I can drive to from Tampa that's not too far away. Also keeping in mind, of course, this is where the impossibility happens, is that we're on a budget. So it's not like we can just go, hog wild on these things. And just, something that where we can just, maybe do a little bit of fishing, maybe go swimming in the lake, just something just fun as a family. Also, don't forget about Otis. He's our little pup. He also needs to be able to come to this place. So if you have any ideas, just send me an email, andrew@atale2hygienist.com. I would be so thankful for anyone that could find a great place for us. That's, probably within 10-hour driving. I don't think we want to take a huge, long road trip, but maybe if it's a little bit further than that, we could think about it. So that is all for me for this week. I hope you all have the most amazing week and enjoy this episode with Dr. Mike Czubiak.
A tale of two hygienists.
Recorded. It's like
it's like a deer in headlights, and then you're like, oh, I don't want to say all the funny stuff anymore, because this is like in perpetuity going to be out there for the world to hear how ridiculous we are, that kind of stuff,
I know there is always that, it's just, that's why I love speaking, because once you speak, it's like it's disappeared, and like you can totally deny. I never said that's stupid. You think I'd be that stupid on stage? No way.
But a podcast, you're locked in. You're
locked in forever. Well, it is weird because, sometimes I'll listen to old shows from like, years ago, like let's say Tale of Two Hygienists 2015. And, you hear some of the stuff. It's just like, wow, they thought that, that they should use chicken bones to clean in between teeth. It's just like, wow.
Why would you go back and listen to anything that's old? That's never a good idea.
It's kind of funny. Just when you search certain things, it's amazing how little information there is on certain things, and there's so much on other things. And so all of a sudden you get some old thing, and, I'm always looking up, because breathing is such a big deal for me. I'm always looking up like podcasts on airway and breathing and sleep. And a lot of them are really old, and the information is changing so quickly that it's just almost totally irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, that's got to be hard. So how do you find the most current research and literature for you?
Well, most of the time I am just in bed with my computer and looking through PubMed and Google Scholar and stuff, and just looking for things. But it's a slippery slope when it comes to research, because honestly, research is biased by the original thoughts that a person has. So I always say you have to be really careful, and I use research to really have me thinking in different directions, but it's not the be all and end all of everything. Really what we see in our patients is probably, who cares what research says if what we see in our patients is different? The research can say you're not going to burn your tongue with a straw, and then you do. It's like,
I think, a lot of the dental professionals would really agree with you, but I think a lot of the speakers, everyone else that's, I don't want to say incentivized by research, so they make their money on disseminating that research or the findings or whatever, probably would not agree with you on that one.
Yeah, a lot of people disagree with me on a lot of things. But
I'm so lucky to have you on the podcast.
But I do sit around thinking about these things, because I work so much with MDs and people in the more medical fields, and they're all about the research. And I was thinking, why are they so hung up on this? Prove it works. Well, let me just say that this is helping my patients and blah, blah. And it just doesn't mean anything. Show me the papers. And then I always ask them, well, do you floss? And they're like, yeah, of course. I'm like, show me the papers that show that flossing is effective. Then continue on your way. Sure, buddy.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I sit around thinking about this stuff because that's just the kind of guy I am. And anyway, I realized that in dentistry, we live with our patients. If something goes wrong, we'll hear it immediately, or the next time we see them, we're going to hear about it, or they'll be back in the office. Those lower anteriors are still rough, and we'll hear about it. Whereas in the MD world, you see your patient, they disappear, and you have no idea if it's worked or not. So you have to rest assured that, hey, I gave them the best I could because the papers say that this is going to work, and I haven't heard from them, so it probably worked. We have a better relationship, but it also means we have more, in a way, ownership of their issues, which that's a whole another subject, is really how in dentistry we own everything. And I know you're someone who, wants to make people happy and wants people to like you, as most of us are like that. That's who we are in the dental profession. And it makes us own a lot of stuff that we have to stop owning. Like owning people's periodontal disease. There's nothing good that comes from that.
But it's so hard. I mean, it's deeply ingrained in us that we want, not only from just like a person to person, but also through education. Our education says, you are the professional. You have to fix this. This is your problem. And it really isn't.
It isn't. And that is a problem with our educational system. But also, I think there's a psychological thing. When you spend an hour invading someone's personal space, there's some ownership of what transpires.
And it's quite the invasion in the mouth. I mean, that's like, it's not surface level. Like, you're going next level deep, right? It's
past that space. It's actually inside the anatomy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dr. Czubiak, we should probably, for reals, I'll probably use all that stuff anyways, but we should probably get really started on the podcast too. The interesting thing I have with you is, and I want the listeners to know that we spent, 2 hours or something like that at Voices of Dentistry in January, just catching up and talking about all things that are just super interesting. You're a very fascinating individual who is very curious about life and curious about why things are the way they are. And we started talking a little bit about your personal journey, and it was just incredible to me. And I want to maybe share that a little bit with the listener, some of the things that you shared with me, and then kind of just the things that you discovered on this journey. And so if we could start first, I want to start with, if you're comfortable speaking about, kind of where your career has taken you, like where did you start? And then the last little bit, kind of where have you ended up so far?
Alrighty. Well, where I am right now is exactly where I'm supposed to be. It's definitely not where I thought I would be, but it's exactly where I should be. And when I look back at my life, it's like every step I took was to get me right here on a podcast with Andrew Johnson. I mean, this is where my life was supposed to take me. And it's just been like that. My life I get kind of blown into these directions. And so sometimes it's hard to know what you want in life. And one thing I've found is that it's worth reflecting. Every year I would take one day a year and I would just reflect on life. And I just see, what opportunities do I want to go after? What do I not? What do I want to start doing? What do I want to stop doing? So I do one day a year of reflection, but really, there's something that just happens that pushes me in position. So I've been a general dentist for 35 years. I mean, anyway, about 35 years is how long I've done this stuff. And, but about 4 years ago, things really changed. I've always been someone who is interested in, we have a complete health practice where we're really looking at inflammation reduction. And one of the big things that happened was at the age of 48, my dad had a heart attack. He happened to survive that because he was across the street from the UCLA Medical Center at the time. And then he died by 60 in his sleep, heart attack, middle of the night, sleep apnea, periodontal disease, rheumatoid arthritis, all these things that if I saw him now, it'd be like obvious. But it was in 2014, I was at an AOSH meeting, my first AOSH meeting. And I was just blown away by this concept of what we do in the mouth has such a profound effect on life. And so I started thinking more deeply about what we do. And so I knew we needed to go after inflammation more. And so our opportunities, our easy opportunities, are periodontal disease, which is, of course, I don't have to tell anyone how important that is. Endodontic disease, getting rid of those teeth that are infected, that are such a big cause of heart disease and heart attacks, and then sleep apnea. And so I really ended up diving deep into sleep apnea because I heard Dr. Dave Singh speak in 2014 at this meeting. And this whole meeting just kind of changed my life and changed my practice. And he talked about remodeling airways so that people can breathe better, not with an appliance in their mouth, but with nothing in your mouth. And I was just blown away, mostly because that runs in my family. So I thought I got to help my family. So I really got into that, and it started to become more enjoyable than a quadrant of composite fillings, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
And I know you, Andrew, I know you probably still would love the idea of just, sculpting out a whole quadrant. But after 35 years of it and working 10 to 14 hours a day, I was just kind of over it. I remember I was seating this set of veneers. It's like this woman, whole set of veneers, and she looked great. And I had no emotional reaction to it. It's like, I'm thinking inside, I'm like, that's so superficial. There's people dying from sleep apnea. So I was thinking, man, this is my passion's really sleep apnea. What should I do? Next thing you know, it's a Sunday afternoon. I'm driving home from Home Depot and get onto the freeway. I'm in Southern California. So I hop on the freeway and of course it's stopped. And so I'm in stop and go traffic. I'm just sitting there for about 10 seconds. And all of a sudden I'm like, did I just get hit? I look in my rearview mirror and there's this truck right into the back of my car. And Sunday night I wake up and I'm numb from my top of my shoulder to the tip of my fingers. So I thought, man, I must have slept on it wrong. And I go to work on Monday morning, and my first patient, I go to do of course, I'm cranking around to do this lingual on number 3. So I'm cranking all around doing that. I finish, I pull away, and I'm like practically fainting on this patient's lap. I'm like, what's that? My assistant's like, I think you have whiplash. I'm like, whiplash? How would, from that little teeny accident? Anyway, 4 years later, and I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of medical treatment, and I'm still numb on 2 of my fingers, and I can't crank around to that side without feeling either nauseated or my fingers going even more numb. So I've had to put down the drill. Well, wow. What a nice surprise when that gave me the perfect opportunity to dive completely into sleep and breathing, since I don't have to crank around and hold a drill spinning at 500,000 RPMs. So life kind of worked out. I mean, it's been a bummer because I literally haven't exercised for 4 years. And so that hasn't been great for my health. And I'm really working on trying to be able to do things without me paying for it for 3 more days after I do anything. So personally, it's been kind of tough, but professionally, it's been fantastic. I mean, I'm really happy to do what I'm doing. And it's just funny how dentistry gives you all sorts of opportunities, and it's been a great career, and it's been always changing. And that's what I love about it.
That's so incredible. I think that, we have talked a lot, and I feel like I've shared this with you, that I feel the same way about dentistry. This has been such a weird opportunity, I think, for me to do what I'm doing right now as well. Nothing of it was planned, but it is. I think I'm supposed to be here right now in this moment doing this thing, and the experiences that are happening, whether they're good or bad, are going to shape me for the next thing to come and the next thing to come. And I think having had that 2014 years when you went to AOSH, getting that seed planted, getting, that your mind just kind of churning into this thing really opened you up for success later on.
I always say that you might think a situation is weird or bad, or am I ever going to use this? But it's what's supposed to be, and it's what makes us all so individual and unique. And timing wise, because you think about your life, what if podcasting hadn't have happened right when it was doing that? It's just that perfect storm. And that's why you are supposed to be here. And you've been such an awesome voice. You are, of all the podcasters out there, you're in like my top 3 podcasters of all podcasters. In the dental space, you're my number 1, of course.
Oh, geez. Editors, we're going to go ahead and cut this part. But take that, Dax Shepard, armchair expert. I'm just kidding.
But you've created a voice for people, and you've really given people a platform to really learn and hear so much. So anyway, and your business sense and your audio sense is something that anyway, I could go on all day.
You're too kind. You are way too kind. I appreciate that very much. And hopefully you do know, like, the respect goes both ways. Like, you're one of my favorite people of all time. But I want to get back to the sleep part. The sleep, as you're modeling this practice, right? So you're shifting away from traditional dentistry. How can you model a business that is revolved around sleep apnea, appliances, whatever you're doing currently?
Yeah, it's interesting because if I got into my accident 15 years ago, I would have been ruined financially, and I would have had to sell my practice. Well, the changes really, because in 31 years of practice up until then, I had only missed 5 days of work due to injury or illness. I just never get sick. And I really, literally I'd had ski accidents where, my arm was pulled out of my socket and all I could do is work on the lower right side. And guess what I did? It's work on the lower right.
Of course.
I don't know about number 14, but boy, number 29 looks really bad. Let's take that. Yeah. I just couldn't move my wing at all. And like, if you ever tried that where you can't move an arm. And so, but I would just muscle through it. And when I focus on dentistry, I can just do anything. It just it's not difficult. It's not hard. But with this injury, I couldn't fake it. I just couldn't really do it. And so the difference though is by having it now is that I have associates that work in my practice. So when I couldn't work, they stepped up and took care of my patients. And then it was a couple months into it where I realized I wasn't coming back to general dentistry. In fact, the funny thing is, this is another one of those weird things. So at the time I was bullet journaling, writing down thoughts or my schedule, whatever, in a notebook. And in September of 2019, I was looking for something and I was going back and I see a page in May of 2019 where I wrote down in some really scratchy writing. So I must have been like falling asleep and I just just blurted this onto a page. It said, by August 2019, I'll no longer be doing general dentistry. I'll be doing sleep and breathing. I'll be fine tuning my practice and I'll find an associate to take over my hours. I'll be a complete positive for the practice. I don't remember writing that at all. And here it is, September. And I look back at this that was written in May 2019. Well, it was June 2019 was my accident. And it was August 2019 when I finally realized I wasn't coming back and I need to find someone. And I found an associate that's a complete positive for the practice. So that's kind of my life. If I think about it, especially if I write it down, it happens. I don't need to know how it's going to happen or what the logistics are, but it's just, that's my luck. And so this accident, as long as I don't die from my lack of activity, it's been a real positive as far as me getting a chance to do this. And in my practice, we are all on board with the idea of helping people decrease their inflammatory sources. And so it's not hard to have my hygienists who are the front line of screening for our patients. And they're the front lines of everything. I mean, my whole practice has been based on hygiene. I started with no patients and I built it up based on the relationships that my hygienists have with their patients. And so when a patient comes in and we added some some sleep and breathing questions like, are you fatigued all day long? Do you wake up unrefreshed? Do you ever wake up gasping? Just a few questions on the health history. If they say yes to that, then I have my hygienist talk for about 45 minutes during the appointment about sleep and breathing.
Wow.
I'm just kidding. I would never know.
I was like, that's some power that you get. Okay.
No. I honestly, all I have the hygienist say is, wow, Andrew, I see here you wrote that you're unrefreshed in the morning. So many of my patients feel just the same way. What they don't realize is that there is something that we do that can help people with that exact same symptom. It's about sleep and breathing and not really having the quality sleep that we should have. So I could speak with you for the next hour about this. I find it totally fascinating, but of course you're here to, take care of do our preventive, visit today. But here's a link to a video. Why don't you watch this? And if it means anything to you, give us a call. Dr. Czubiak would be happy to talk more about the video and answer any of your questions and see if you're a good candidate. And that's all they do. So I kind of did the long version, but it's usually about 45 seconds.
Is that video an internal video, or is that like something you've created, or is that something that you've sourced on like YouTube or whatever?
Yeah, it's my office manager does. It's like a 40-minute little, we call it a patient education meeting. So it's a patient education video that she did. So it's on YouTube. But
oh, nice.
Yeah.
So they go through this intake. They watch the video, they come back, and that first real meeting with you, what are you screening for? What are you assessing?
Yeah, I am screening for, basically it's craniofacial deficiencies. It's underdevelopment of the middle of our face. Let's talk about me some more.
My favorite subject. I like it.
In 1975, I had 4 bicuspids extracted and everything was retracted back. And I went from not looking very pretty to being pretty enough to get married. But it came with a price, and that price was I would eventually have sleep apnea. Although I have to say I pretty much had it right away. It just wasn't officially sleep apnea, but I was fatigued my whole life. I never had dreams. I would wake up in the middle of the night with my brain just going 100 miles an hour. And all those things were because of my sleep apnea. And so, and it's very, I don't know, it's not rocket science. If you make a really small mouth and you have a normal sized tongue, that tongue can no longer live in the oral cavity. So it has to live halfway down your throat. You can use muscles to keep it out of the way, but as you get older, sometimes you just don't have the strength and the ability to keep that tongue forward. But there's a lot of it because I was affected even as a teenager. I was obviously not sleeping well. So it's really, we have these really narrow faces, narrow arches. This is why, embarrassingly enough, we'll keep this between me and you, Andrew.
Sure.
Who's listening? I had braces once and Invisalign 3 times, and I was still getting lower teeth crowded because I didn't realize what was going on. And now I totally get it. If, when you say, how long do you have to wear retainers? You have to say, well, it depends on your tongue function, because my tongue was never on the roof of my mouth, counteracting my masseters, making me more narrow. And so narrow mouths don't house tongues. That's going to cause sleep issues. Then it's going to cause the crowding on the lowers. So all this stuff is related. And so I had to clear my nose so that I could breathe through my nose. So then I could keep my tongue on the roof of my mouth. And then my tongue could stay on the roof of my mouth instead of in the back of my throat. But because my mouth was so small, I also had to widen it. So expansion, tongue placement, and nasal clearing. That's the key to a good night's sleep.
And you're saying widening as an adult?
As an adult, yeah, as an old person. Yeah, this whole, I don't know who said that you can't grow after puberty. I mean, if anyone's watched lingual tori grow over the years, it makes you.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Or how about you extract a tooth and you do bone grafting? And that's not really, you're not putting bone in there. You're letting bone grow. Guess what? Bone grows, bone remodels until you die. So yes, I have expanded people and doing it not by breaking open this mid-palatal suture, but I've grown mandibles to be 6-7 millimeters wide on a 70-year-old, and 75-year-olds. And so, yeah, it can happen at any age. And that is really when I go to places like Guatemala and take care of kids in the middle of nowhere, you see these big, gigantic arches that fit all 32 teeth. They don't, I'm asking, I'm like, who's your orthodontist? You look really good. And of course, that wasn't in Spanish, so they didn't know what I was saying. But these arches are beautiful because they have good tongue function. They have enough room for the tongue space. And so where the lack of, the tongue dysfunction part of dentistry has never been addressed well enough, but it's just starting to come around. And that's why I beg every hygienist I ever meet to become a myofunctional therapist. We need more of them, and we need to be able to have people identifying dysfunctional tongues, dysfunctional swallow patterns. And if we do that, it will control our mouth, because your mouth is out of control until your tongue is there. And in a perio sense, when you're nasally congested like I was, you're breathing through your mouth, you're changing your microbiome, nothing good is going to come of it. And if you're going to see your adult patients that keep getting cavities over and over again, no matter what you do and how much fluoride varnish you throw on their face, they keep getting cavities. And look at them, they're mouth breathers. And you can see that they have the dry lower lip. They wake up in the morning with a dry mouth. I mean, it's right there in front of us. I like to say it's right there, in front of our nose. So
why is it that the children of Guatemala or some of these other places have better tongue function than we do?
Yeah, well, tongue function really comes from, we use our tongue to keep food on our teeth, to keep it on the occlusal table so we can eat. And so when you are eating Gerber's baby food, you need no tongue action at all. You're slurping it up. Or if your parent is spoon feeding you and throwing that stuff halfway down your throat, your tongue's doing nothing. In fact, you create bad habits, because like if you're drinking from a bottle, you're using your tongue to help dam up the onslaught of liquid as opposed to the suckling of breastfeeding. So there's that, because these people live sort of off grid, and so they don't have access to formula and bottles and all that. So they basically eat harder foods and they breastfeed a long time. And then there's also the aspect of the bone growth and the bone development. The signaling for that is basically flexing of the sutures in our face. And we get that from eating hard foods. And when you're living in the middle of nowhere let's go 400 years back. It used to take people 4 or 5 hours a day to eat. They were eating, they didn't have refrigeration. So everything was just like out of the ground and munching on root things, and meat was not really oftentimes cooked. It was like salted meat that was just like gnawed on. And so those days of probably, you're probably not going to have your kid gnawing on a leg of llama, for salted llama, it's just those days. I think that's flown, but there are little devices that have been around since the 60s. They are the MyoBrace or Healthy Start, or I use Vivos Guides, but they're little silicone mouthpieces that kids can wear. And every time they swallow at night, they wear them at night. And when they swallow about 500 to 700 times a night, it's like eating food all night long. So it's kind of replacing the harder food diets, because people always ask me, yeah, so what hard foods should I be feeding my kids? I'm like, that ship has kind of sailed as far as bone growth, because that flexing is really what makes people grow wider, because we are just too darn narrow. But using these appliances can really help a kid just continue to grow and grow. So a good assessment of whether you're undergrown facially or not. After about 120 years ago, maybe 100 years ago, they did a lot of research looking at bone development, craniofacial development. And that's when you have angle classifications. That's when he was working and doing this stuff. And they were really looking to see, how do you know how grown out a person is? And that work led to measuring all sorts of things. And our best measurement is basically the space in between our upper first molars. So if you look in between 3 and 14 from on the lingual surfaces, generally good breathers are 38 to 42 millimeters. And I was 29.7. So not really big.
Wow.
And as since we are in people's mouths, and you probably don't have a bully gauge or something to stick in there, use a cotton roll. Cotton rolls are generally, most of them are 37 millimeters. I think my cheapo brand are 34, but saving a little money on that. But measure your cotton rolls. They're usually 37 millimeters. So you stick those in between someone's upper molars, and if it fits, then that's a good sign that they're probably there. But also lower crowding, or my easiest favorite one is a scallop tongue. If you have a tongue that has lateral scalloping, that is a tiger that is shoved into too small of a cage. And I'm referencing an excellent book by Felix Liao called 6 Foot Tiger, 3 Foot Cage. Definitely worth reading. And it'll just change what you're looking at in the mouth. So anyway, I could go on for hours about that. You can tell it's my passion, probably.
Well, I think it's absolutely fascinating. Dr. Liao was at Hot Topics, and that was my first exposure to him. And everyone, if this is remotely interesting to you, definitely get the book, because, well, he has a couple of books actually, but that one that you're referencing, I think would be a good starting point. He was so on point with his case studies. And that's the thing that I really liked about what he had to offer. I want to talk about, you mentioned earlier that your brain wouldn't shut off at night. You couldn't, it was just going. Yeah. That is a common ADD, ADHD kind of symptom, so to speak. Tell me more, what has evolved lately on the thoughts of sleep and ADD kind of correlating?
Yeah. Because you think it's kind of an ADHD. It's actually ADHD and insomnia tend to be just symptoms of something bigger. And I have to qualify all of this because people accuse me of being like a hammer and everything's a nail. Mike, to you, everything's about Airway. It's like, give me an example of something. And it could be totally unrelated to you. Why did my cell phone screen break? Yeah, I'm sure it's an Airway issue. Everything is Airway to me. But there's an oral contribution to it, definitely from sleep and breathing stuff. So not to say that anything, I never tell my patients, I will fix this or I'll fix that. What I'll tell them is I'll fix the oral contribution to that issue. And let me tell you about myself. So I would wake up at 2 a.m. and I would be my mind would go a million miles an hour until I finally fell asleep at about 4 or 4:30 after totally panicking the whole time, thinking, oh my God, I got a big day tomorrow. I can't be awake right now.
Yeah.
Or 6 hours after falling asleep, I would wake up and my mind would be like, hey, why don't you get started with the day? Because there's no way I'm letting you go back to sleep. And so that happened to me most of my life. And I thought, hey, I got a lot of stuff going on. Life's busy. I got things going on. There's a study out of Stanford, I believe, or at least the thinking from their research that they're showing now is that our brain is very smart and it knows the priority in life is breathing. Sleeping is not a priority. Breathing is. Sleeping is a priority after breathing, but it's secondary. And so if you are having a collapsing airway during sleep, our brain will say, hey, why don't you not sleep? Hey, let me throw some ideas in your head that'll keep you awake.
Oh, wow.
Why don't we keep you awake long enough until your oxygen levels get back to a certain level, and then I'll think about letting you go to sleep. And so once I fixed my sleep apnea, that never ever happens to me again. That hasn't happened to me in years, where it used to happen to me several times a week. So that's why.
That's incredible.
Yeah. What happens, the danger in medicine or in life is that things become common. And so then we start accepting them, and we shouldn't accept insomnia like that. Some people it's falling asleep. Some people it's staying asleep, and some people it's not being able to get enough sleep. So I see this all day long, and yeah, you want to quiet the brain, but not really, because the noisy brain is keeping you alive. I mean, the cure to sleep apnea and low oxygen levels is staying awake. So
yeah.
Our brain's like, let's do that. Let's keep you awake. Woo! So yeah.
So not to continue with the hammer metaphor that this is going to like fix everything, but however, so let's walk through. Let's say that, I was a patient who, I wasn't getting restful sleep and on all of these things. But when I come in and you do the measurement, I'm at 39 millimeters or whatever and I have a decent sized arch. Are there other things that you're looking at to make sure, like, what else could be the problem at that point?
Yeah, there can be a lot of problems, because we can have where we tend to be collapsible is our tongue falling backwards, or our soft palate getting pushed backwards, or even our epiglottis. That's the area. If I'm going to strangle someone, I'm going to that area, not up higher where the skull is, or lower where the trachea, where we have cartilage holding everything open. This is a vulnerable spot, and you can detect these things with a cone beam scan. You can see small airways, but sometimes people have big airways and they just collapse really easily. So we have to look at everything. It's totally multifocal, because we look at everything. If you have, the classic person that looks like they have sleep apnea looks like me, as a matter of fact. It's an older dude that's probably not as skinny as he should be. And I look like someone who, has sleep apnea, but I see people all the time. One of my family members, she was 31 years old, 98 pounds, and she would stop breathing 40 times per hour during her REM sleep. And wow. So looking at body types, you can't really tell, but we have to deal with that, because if someone's heavy, for instance, it's harder to keep an airway open. But the other big thing is allergies. Nasal patency, keeping the nose open, is really huge. So you could have the best anatomy in the world. Now, they know that 98% of, there's this article that came out in 2011, and I know this goes back to 1990 when the late Christian Gimeno, who is basically the father of sleep medicine out of Stanford, he was talking about the anatomy being the root cause of sleep apnea. And so changing that anatomy is really important. But you could have the best anatomy in the world. You could have, 43 millimeter wide arch and a tongue that's not scalloped. But if you can't breathe through your nose because you sleep with your cat that you're allergic to every night, you'll probably get lousy sleep. And if you like your adult beverage right before bed, and you're someone who tends to collapse during REM sleep, that is a sign of, if you use your muscles to keep your airway open and you have a beer right before you go to bed, you're going to sleep terribly. And that's the problem with drinking, within hours of bedtime, is it will make you just breathe lousy because you can't keep your muscles open. So yeah, there's all sorts of things that are a part of that for sure.
Oh man, I'd almost be a little detective in there, like trying to figure out, like, okay, check. This is my differential diagnosis, right? Check. Sounds complicated, doctor.
It's really not. Actually, it all makes complete sense. And it's not really these things aren't really hidden. They're really out in front of us. But in order to breathe, we have to have, like I said, we have to have our nose has to be cleared. Our tongue has to be on the roof of the mouth. And then we need to have our bones in the right spot so that it can accommodate everything. And so you look at that. If someone has a tongue tie, their tongue can't be on the roof of the mouth. It's just not going to be there. They're going to end up being narrower because, the teeth aren't in bone. I mean, they're in bone. They're not in concrete. So when we have masseters that push on the buckles of our upper teeth And our tongue has to be on the roof of the mouth to counteract those forces. Otherwise, they'll keep pushing them in all the time. And so we really need to be concerned with where tongues are. And, we see this all the time. We don't even know what it is. That patient that can't sit backwards, like you go to put them backwards and they're like, oh, you're killing me. Yeah. And you're like, I'm putting you back in the chair, ma'am. They have an airway issue. They can't go back. Anyone that you have to get the neck pillow out for is probably someone who has a head forward posture, which they're doing to open up their airway. So these are things you just start seeing. And so that's why even if a person doesn't want to become a myofunctional therapist, doing myofunctional classes just to see what our opportunity is to identify these things and get them to someone who wants to do that stuff, there's a huge opportunity. And the difference you can make when you teach a 8-year-old to be able to breathe properly, oh my goodness, it just feels so good. It just feels so good.
Well, I love where your journey has taken you. One of the things I just love about you is that you are a huge advocate for the hygiene community. You've always put us, first and foremost. And I mean, I probably can't speak on behalf of the hygiene community, but if I could, I would say thank you very much for that. But let me ask you this as we're kind of wrapping up. You talked a lot about myofunctional therapy, and I think that that's being spoken about more and more and more. I think the hygienists are becoming more aware of it. But if you had a different message, if you had any sort of other message for the hygiene community about what should they be doing for their patients day in and day out? Yeah.
So I'll tell you that 2014 meeting really was my big epiphany moment. It was weird. It's when I realized that there was a huge message to get out about what we can do in the dental practice to help our patients live longer. And that's when I decided to write a book. And if you saw my SAT scores, you'd be like, that's a stupid idea. But I decided I was going to do that. And I was thinking if I write it for patients, only people that are already like looking for this stuff will read it. And I thought, well, I'll write it for dentists. I know dentists. But I'm thinking, well, they're not going to read it because, they're not going to read it. And so then I realized that who has the best relationships ever? And it's the hygienist. Of all the healthcare professionals out there in the world, who has a better relationship than hygienists have? They have the relationship, they have the opportunity, they see people repeatedly, and it's a awesome thing. And so I wrote the book for dental hygienists, and honestly, I didn't know how it was going to be perceived because, as a dentist, I didn't know if people wanted to hear anything I had to say. So anyway, I wrote this book, Hygiene Superstar, and I've been amazed at how well received the hygiene community has been with it. And I am so proud of everyone. So if there's one thing I could say is create a mantra of healthy gums don't bleed, and stop thinking of yourself or allowing people to think of you as a mouth cleaner. You are disrupting biofilm. You're doing more to decrease people's risk for inflammatory diseases, which is a huge issue. 70% of us will die from chronic inflammatory diseases, and no one will do more for that than a dental hygienist. So we need to up our game. I don't mean that what we're doing is not good, but honestly, and I know I get a lot of flack for this, but I really do say if you fall back on the notion of you just have to tell your patients to floss more, then you're not looking at things the correct way, because it's really not about patients flossing more. It's really about educating them to what they really need to do to decrease their inflammation. And a lot of that is coming back to see us more often. The 6 months thing is ridiculous. And then what we do is ridiculous, because we need to make sure that our patients have things that they want to do. They want to come in, and I've heard that, I know, Andrew, I've heard you talk about EMS airflow. that really does make for incredibly comfortable cleaning. And my patients just love that. They're so, it makes them want to come in. And then having our hygienist not yell at them because they haven't been flossing enough. And I do have a big bone to pick, and I don't want to bring that up right now because I know a certain amount of people hate me. But I have to say, if you think there's research that backs up flossing, you're wrong. There's no research out there that suggests that flossing actually is effective. We got to get people talking about either interproximal brushes or water picks, or, I should say oral irrigators, because our patients give them an oral irrigator and they're totally happy. They're going to be more effective. You'll see, I have so many hygiene patients because I have a huge hygiene team. And so when we do something, we see big differences. And when we saw electric toothbrushes come into being, oh man, everyone got so much better. And then when people started using oral irrigators, all of a sudden there's just a big rise again. And we were able to more easily get to our goal of no bleeding, and it's that simple. So that's my quick little thing.
I love it. No bleeding. That's the mantra we all need to have. I love it.
Healthy gums don't bleed.
If someone wanted to reach out to you, or if they want to get the book, where can they find you?
The book is on Amazon. And then I have a podcast, Hygiene Superstar, that is hit and miss when I do it these days. And then reaching out to me, I know I'm such not that I should be telling you all my Instagrams and Facebooks.
So email addresses work too.
Yeah, it's mike@camriosmiles.com.
Right.
And I'm happy. All I do is sit around and talk about teeth and gums and Airway. And I'm like you, just a big nerd.
Just a big dental nerd. We just love it so much.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is a long time in coming. I really appreciate you making the time today. Thank you so much, Doctor. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, for sure.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.